Here we go.
You're
Good morning, everybody. It's Jane Johnston with Briar Hill Group here with
Andrew Plank from Royal LePage, and hello, everyone.
Hello. How's it going? Did you have a good weekend?
I had a good weekend. Yeah, I was just off visiting a friend in Parksville. We had planned to go to Spain for his 50th birthday, a bunch of us, and then COVID came on. So we ended up in Parksville, which was a great time, actually, at Tinamera for a little birthday weekend.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
So, first of all, let's start with our statistics with what's happening in the market. I'm going to bring them up here right now.
What is happening in this market?
It is crazy. I'm feeling like the condo market, not the condo market, the townhouse market is heating up, but we don't have that specific statistic here.
No, that's a teaser. That's really, really. Let's talk about the townhouse market and not bring stats.
Well, I do think we're up though, 863 this year, month to date. So it's the 28th. We've got 2 more days to go, and then 616 last year. So we're up about 30%.
Yeah, quite a big jump in sales for sure for September.
Yeah. New listings though,
only the same.
Well, only up 30 from last year.
Yeah.
So overall, we're down 2,560 listings, active listings compared to 28-23. Did you find that it was busy over the past week?
Well, I was away this weekend, but I did have a colleague looking after some things and definitely active for showing my clients' properties. I've been having people still coming out of the woodwork saying, it's time for us to sell. It's time, what's my place worth? This weekend, while we were walking on the beach with my friends and talking birthday stuff, there was also, hey, we'd really like to find this. Can you get me that? We want to make a change. Everyone is, thinking real estate still. So there's definitely not a pause. Definitely not a pause.
So my husband said to me on the last night, he goes, there's a thought that real estate is in a bubble that's going to burst. And I thought, well, I think it's really market dependent, what market you're in, where it might burst and where the economy's strong or not.
I don't like talking bubbles anymore. And, it's very possible that we're in a bubble. It's very possible we're not in a bubble. We've been in a bubble, I think, since we got our licenses in 2006. If I was to, there's always been somebody saying we're in a bubble, prices are too high, they're going to drop. And every once in a while they do somewhat, but then they come back gangbusters. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think? I keep hearing bubble and people say bubble and
Well, actually, I think the last 2 years have been really flat. We went through a high, and then unfortunately, we're in an area where we're on an island, so we have limited space. We have great weather, and we have a good economy.
You said unfortunately. Unfortunately, we live in a wonderful place. Is that what you're saying?
Unfortunately, because it means that a lot of people, I think, probably... I think the prices are still going to continue to go up. Yeah.
I have a little personal joke that says, we're one tsunami away from a housing market crash. But
it's true. I do think about that. I'm actually up on a ridge for that.
Oh, and there's a couple of tremors out there.
You're getting some laughs. I just thought I'd let you know.
Yeah.
Getting some laughs. Okay, new listings past 308,
Uh-huh.
222 pending, which is awesome. And price decrease is 108. And I think this is because people are realizing they got to get their house sold. Most people who are listing now want to close before Christmas. Would you agree?
Okay.
Oh, he has gone into Never Never Land. And then we have 196 sold. This is just in the past 7 days. So we see a lot of
Quite a
closings
bit.
happening. Are you back?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was reading
Yeah,
something. Go
absolutely.
ahead.
I holidays and everything is out. People are planning around holidays.
Andrew, you're going to have to go out and
Who,
come back
me?
in again. You're going to have to go out and come back in again. So we'll wait for Andrew to come out. I just want to tell you, on the weekend, I saw a board with some very good advice in our office. If you are closing on a deal, do not close on a Friday. And we've been told this since I got into real estate. The reason for that is because there are a lot of other deals closing on a Friday. It's stressful. If you're dealing with a bank back east, they're 3 or 4 hours away, and they close earlier than we do. So that can also be stressful. Often, if people are working like with a TD branch in Toronto or something, I've had that happen where solid buyer, the banker just went home at the end of the day, and on the Friday, we were hooped for the weekend. So that's number one. Number two is always have your completions in the middle of the week so that if there is a problem, that we then have a few days to rectify the situation. And then the third is to make sure you have your completion on one day and your possession on the next day. And what that does is it allows you to then, if there is a problem, we can delay it to the next day. Are you okay? And don't plan your move on the day of completion, plan your move on the day of possession.
I'm fine. I didn't realize there was even a problem.
You're still zooming out there. Maybe it's
Can you
me.
hear me?
I can hear you.
Are you? I think it might be you.
Okay. Could be.
I've been here as far as I could tell. I was here all along, and you kept talking to me, and I was talking, and you just didn't even hear me. So I don't know what's going on. Can anybody comment? What are you seeing? Me? Are you seeing Jane? Are you seeing both of us? What's going on here?
I don't know. Okay, so what are some problems that you've had with completions and at the end of the
Oh,
contract?
yeah. Well, what haven't we seen, right? I've had a situation. One of the really stressful ones where we had clients who had purchased a condo. It was being sold under power of attorney, and they removed conditions. We had an unconditional contract. It was due to close in, I don't remember, a month or two, and then the seller passed away. And so suddenly we're in a situation where the contract had been signed by a person with power of attorney. With the person who had given the power of attorney passed away, that contract was no longer good, because although you have in the contract some terms that say this is binding on your heirs, executors, and assigns, when someone passes, their power of attorney passes with them. And so that person who had signed didn't have the authority to sign anything further, and it went into estate. So my clients and they were moving here from out of province, and they had no place to go. And just luckily, we were able to negotiate and work out that they could actually come in prior to close. And we were able to, it took a year, I think, before probate was granted and everything all came through on that. It took a long, long time. So they're at home for quite some time. Can you hear me okay?
Jackie Nagai says that you're coming in and out, but I can hear you.
Okay.
I think it's better now. It's not your microphone, it's your service or something. Anyway,
I think my partner is in the other room, probably also on a Zoom call. So it might be that there's a lot of bandwidth being used.
okay. I always tell everybody in the house they have to get off.
She's
Okay,
also got important work.
so I have an interesting story about that. I had a buyer purchasing a house, and the realtor on the other side said something casually to me. Oh, she's not doing that well. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And turns out that the seller was terminally ill and was in hospice. And I said, okay, well, I think we just need to, for her sake, her family's sake, and for my buyer's sake, we need to get this going. So we actually moved the dates up, and I think we closed a week later. And she
Yeah.
did pass away, unfortunately, before,
Mhm.
like we were supposed to. So these are facts of life, unfortunately, that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
go ahead.
I'm going to change. I'm going to try another thing here. I'm going to try opening the door so that there's a bit more bandwidth coming through, and changing. I'm going to the 5G network here. So
Okay,
bear with me quickly, and let's
okay.
just see if that works.
I'll tell another story. So recently, one thing to be aware of is if you make an unconditional offer on a house and you do not put in a condition of an inspection, or that you have the access to the house one time between completion and possession, you cannot find out information necessarily for the insurance. And so this can put you at a bit of a disadvantage as a buyer.
Yeah.
And so what happened to one of my clients was they called me up and they're like, I need to know about the fireplace. And luckily the listing agent was very good. So
Most times everybody's good about it, but sometimes, and we are coached oftentimes, don't let the buyers through after it's unconditional. That's sort of a one school of thought, because what if they come through, have second thoughts, see something they hadn't noticed before, and sour on the property, and suddenly you've got a problem, and maybe they're talking to lawyers and things are getting really ugly. So there is a school of thought if, don't let people in once it's unconditional. And so we mitigate that by actually insisting on it when we write a contract as a buyer's agent. The seller will provide access up to 2 times with 24 hours notice for the purposes of X, Y, and Z, those kind of things. I always include,
for Canadians.
I remember I'm American-Canadian. Oh, look at you. Wow.
Okay, but so
Uh-huh.
this really speaks to the point that when you write an offer, you want to really write it with the objectives in mind. And so if you're renovating on a property, you want to have access a few times to bring your contractors through, which sellers can get a little bit testy about. But even just once, so you can get them through to do the measurements and get your estimates and stuff. Because especially if you're doing a purchase plus improvements loan, you want to get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, you're going to get the most access to the property while you're still conditional, and the balls are in your court. Once you are unconditional, if you haven't put those things in, and granted, if you're competing offer and you are in a market where it's a seller's market, you may not be able to get those kind of considerations in there. If it hurts your offer, it's a balancing act, and you have to think about those things. Other things you want to think about when you're making an offer, or what could go wrong at closing. What if there's a fire? What if something happens to this home in between you going unconditional and the closing date, right?
Have you
And
had that happen?
it can happen. Yeah. I mean, it's never happened to me, but it can happen, obviously. And if it does, what are you going to do about it? What if it's and the big one for me, and I always tell my clients, make sure you have insurance on the property, and if possible, use the same insurance company that the sellers were using. Reason being, and it's obviously a small chance, but what if there was a fire on the closing day, and you've got insurance by one provider here and insurance by one provider just coming in at midnight the next day, and the fire started at 11 p.m. that night? Who's responsible for the repair? And you have 2 insurance companies fighting over this, whether it's a flood. And floods actually are often a big thing, because for some reason, when properties are changing hands and people are turning off power and hot water tanks are maybe on their last legs, that's when they tend to give. So you really want one insurance company that's straddling both of those time frames.
And hot water
no gap.
often go when people turn them off and turn them back on again.
They do.
And so, and a lot of people turn them off because they're moving. Then the buyer comes in. Oh my God.
Yep.
I've had it happen. I had it happen in a showing. Oh my God.
Showing. Good times.
Of my listing.
Uh,
And we got an offer on the property.
Yeah.
And so we had completion in 3 months, and the renovators, because the place was vacant, were taking their time. And finally I had to tear a strip off of them to get them to finish the renovation, the remediation. And then oh my God. And then not only did the hot water tank of the unit above fail, by the way, they usually last like 8 years.
8 to 10 years, yeah.
Then the sprinkler system outside the condo was spraying water into the condo through a window. And then when we lifted up the flooring to do the remediation, we discovered mold all along the wall. And it turns out that the perimeter drains of the whole complex were failing.
That's a nightmare, Jane. Absolute nightmare.
And the buyer still wanted to continue.
Huh.
It's a condo building on Morrison.
Yep.
And they wanted to live in kind of the Oak Bay Junction, and this was the least expensive condo anyway. So we just got it all done.
So let me just ask you, because you said something interesting. You said the buyer still wanted to continue. Do you believe the buyer would have had an option or a choice to get out of the contract? Do you think there was enough of a material change there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you're buying a unit, and it has to be fundamentally the same as when you saw it.
Substantially as viewed it'll be in substantially the same condition as viewed.
Yeah.
The contract. Yeah.
So it wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except for the
Which is where we suggest that you consult a lawyer.
Yes. Okay. What about, I've had this happen. What about when a seller doesn't want to sell after they've sold the property?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's where they can make it really difficult for the buyer in terms of all kinds of things. They will be looking for a reason to get out. They're going to be looking over the contract, looking for any errors in the contract. That's why it's so important to make sure, a contract can be written with like holes you could drive a truck through it. And if everybody wants to complete on it, it's not a problem. But when somebody wants out, that's where you've got to really make sure you dotted your I's, crossed your T's.
Yeah.
As I like to say, crossed your I's and dotted your T's.
Well, I find like what we're doing, and thank God for Danielle, is she's checking the contract to make sure that everything is copacetic. Mm-hmm. Because we want to, Danielle's my assistant, we want to make sure we're precise. So like there's in paragraph 11 has a time of 4 p.m. that the completion. I don't know why they have that in there, but everybody now crosses that out based on the advice of one lawyer in the city. And if you get a contract that's not crossed out, I get a note from the office and I have to initial it. And then is that a counter offer, or is it like administrivia?
It's a counter offer technically.
Yeah.
And now we're going to go down a rabbit hole because I don't believe that's a good idea. Although I do it too, because it seems like, well, first of all, it shouldn't be that you have to have it done by the office. But if one person has done it, obviously, and it's missed the initial, it should be done. But it's not going to kill a contract one way or another if it's not written up. That thing crossed off. Now we're getting into really, subtle stuff. But crossed off just gives the lawyers more time to complete the transaction and work a little bit later. But if that by 4 p.m. means that if you have a number of domino effect closings and you have one done by 4 p.m. and it doesn't get done until 4 p.m., or if you've lost and it doesn't get done until 4 p.m., then they can still work on the next closings and get them done by, let's say, 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. But if it doesn't get done till 11:59 p.m., and there's other ones that are layered to go after that because there's a sale there's others, one purchase is subsequent on a sale, which is then I think it's a problem. So I don't actually believe that's a great clause. But now we're going down a side road.
Okay.
You get what I'm saying?
I do get what you're saying. So, one other issue. What happens? So, if there's a lot of crap in the property, so I've had this
Yeah.
happen where I didn't write the contract. I was working with I was mentoring another realtor, and they wrote the contract, and the basement was filled with crap.
Yeah.
And we're talking needles, rat poo, um, toys of a nefarious kind.
That just sounds unhealthy on so many levels.
And so, and I
Yeah.
happen to know the buyer quite well. And their mother showed up on completion date, and she tore a strip off me because I showed up. And I'm like, So
Hmm.
anyway, we went over and we literally took a shovel and shoveled all that crap out.
Yeah, you need a hazmat team at that point.
It was
So,
brutal.
as a matter of course, I do recommend to my clients, regardless of what time the completion possession dates on a contract show, and I also like to have them. Ideally, there's a gap between possession and completion, so completion and possession. Um, but whatever the possession time is, I've shown up enough times where, you show up to give your keys to meet the buyer and give them their keys at this wonderful time, and the seller's still there, and their moving truck hasn't arrived, and their home is still full of stuff, and it may not be needles and toys and things and rats, but it's still a problem. So, always coaching the buyers for worst case scenario. We're gonna plan for the best. We're gonna hope for the best and plan for the worst. One of the ways you can plan for that is contract, right? You put it into the contract. Options are a holdback, which is we're holding back money, and if this stuff isn't taken care of, the money goes to the buyer, and that
Yeah.
goes towards compensating them for these problems or paying for junk removal or whatever. Or it's a fundamental term of the contract. It means, like, if this doesn't happen, this contract doesn't go forward. For something really major, you might make it fundamental term. That's a pretty powerful one and not always in your best favor. But yeah, these are some of the options. But definitely, I always say don't bring the moving truck that day if you can help it, and maybe prepare to do some cleaning, because this is different than a rental.
Yeah, and I think also people have to realize that agents are usually, in that case, actually, the agent would not admit to any problem because I think she didn't want to cooperate, but mostly agents cooperate, and they're working together to try and make it work for everybody. So they'll work with the seller if they realize that there's a problem. We do not tend to have walkthroughs before closings here, like they do in
Mm-hmm.
other countries or provinces, and the reason is because here you close and the money, it's a solid deal, whereas in other, like in the US, it's not always a solid deal. They then have to meet around the table and just, I don't know what they do.
That whole escrow thing. Yeah. No, in
Yeah.
this case, it's just done, and the money's changed hands, and the title is transferred, and it's your place now. And yeah, so all the more important for actually being prepared for those problems, but they're very rare, but not as rare as you might think. They do happen.
So what do you find is the one thing I find, one thing that buyers often forget to do before completion? For me, it's insurance. They forget to, I have a checklist I give them. Do this,
Yeah.
this, and then they forget the insurance.
Um, Insurance, I don't hear when they've forgotten about insurance. They're probably not going to just tell me this, but I do send them a checklist too, and that's one of the things we often talk about. Um, so that's not such a big deal. What would they be forgetting? The main one, I think, is just forgetting that the place may not be perfect when you move in. Do be prepared for some work to do. They forget what we all forget. We have these rose-colored glasses, and we forget what it is we're buying sometimes. And then you get in and realize, oh, there's always a little bit, not always, but there can be some buyer's remorse. And there can be also some additional work that maybe hadn't been anticipated. So it's really important to manage that expectation and have that preparation. No, I don't have, my clients don't forget things, Jane.
Yeah, I've had a friend of mine who was one of my first clients. This is when I started doing the checklist.
Yeah,
Um, think that the completion day was a possession day,
right.
and and had the moving truck ready. And anyway, there's a reason why there is the contract. So read the contract.
Yeah, and also it is like again great to send reminders about those dates to your clients, because that is a piece that when you actually, that was something, I think we both do this as we have been in this career for a while. We start to see these recurring themes, and you realize that people's memories and even our memories are not infallible. So sending reminders, here's the actual dates, here are the things you have to do, knocking them over the head with it, making sure their insurance stuff is all lined up. Don't buy a car before completion. Um, Lots of little reminders that people go on about their lives and kind of forget about until it gets close to the day.
We need to send them a calendar invite to the completion, a possession, I mean,
Yeah,
not the completion anymore, because we were sending it to the completion and they were getting confused. And so
right.
this is just jargon. Completion,
Exactly.
the money goes through, and possessions when you get the house. So often they're not at the same day. They're one day after the other.
So here's one. Tenants.
Oh yeah.
You've negotiated vacant possession, and the tenants haven't moved out, or they're a problem tenant, or they've left a big mess. Um, do you have any kind of practice or policy around that?
Never. I've never had a problem.
Okay. Getting them noticed in time is sometimes a challenge, even just for the vacant possession. The timing of that can be problematic depending on, anyway, getting into subtleties, but
Well, what I find honestly is you have to go back, like, what are the essential facts? And let's get back to the facts, because sometimes what happens where the train goes off the rails is when you have emotion coming into it and people getting upset. Like, I had a seller who wouldn't sign off on the last day. And, she just wanted somebody to listen to her. She was
Mhm.
saying goodbye to her home. I was in the States in the middle of a conference, and I just stepped into her room and I listened to her for half an hour
Yeah.
and express her sorrow about leaving her home, and then she was okay. Usually there's some underlying reason that we just have to figure out what is the issue here. And then once we figure out what the issue is, we can solve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't had a tenant not vacate. I've heard of that. But when that's happened, I find a face-to-face conversation helps.
Yeah.
And I always ask people when they're buying a home and they have a suite, are you the type of person to handle having a tenant? Because I think it's a mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Some people aren't comfortable with that, and it
Mm-hmm.
happened in my first sales. A couple bought a house and they had tenants, and she was already giving them a deal, and I'm like, don't give them a deal. Well, he can't afford the deposit. Okay, don't rent to him. Oh, no. And it turned
Yeah.
out like they were just a problem tenant with issues. And anyway, but so now I have a kit that I give people who are going to be landlords, and then it has a contract and it has terms and it has suggestions and resources.
It's a good idea. Yeah.
Everybody out there, get a kit.
I don't know. I hear that and I think, I don't, we wear so many hats, and I was just at a showing the other day, and I'm you know stepping into some role that would typically be a building inspector's role, saying they've got to pull some of the dirt away from the siding and this and that, but we're told over and over again, you don't play the role of building inspector, you don't play the role, our licensing isn't as a rental agent, we shouldn't give advice on rentals. So when I hear you saying that, I'm like, part of my back goes up, but at the same, like, oh my God, you got to be careful what we do here on these responsibilities we take on as fiduciaries. But at the same time, I also recognize that we all are expected, and we have knowledge, and we're expected to use that knowledge by some degree by our clients. But we have to be careful that we really don't step outside the bounds of our licensing.
I don't, it's funny, I say to them, I'm not giving you this advice based on as a realtor. I'm giving it based on as a landlord,
Mm-hmm.
my experience as a landlord.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I've been renting. And anyway, I think you just have to be upfront. Often what I'm finding, even though we're not residential tenancy specialists. We do not, our license here in Victoria or in BC does not include rentals like it does elsewhere in the country.
It can, but most agents are just licensed as salespeople.
Yeah. In Ontario, do they get licensed for both at the same time?
You're asking me an Ontario question, me who
Well,
raised on the West, never lived there. Don't know.
okay. Well, I do notice that a lot of them talk about leasing at the same time. So I'm not into that. And I find that often while we're trying to be helpful, we're connecting the dots for people. So I always go here, go here, go here.
Yeah.
And I have a list of resources and ideas and perspective.
Yeah. And we're always asked when we're walking through a suite with a client, hey, what do you think this will rent for? And we're expected to know these things, and yet, it's not within our actual licensing and realm, and any advice we give can and will be used against us if we end up getting them in some trouble that they relied on that advice. So we have to be careful about it. It's the only thing. Maybe I'm a little too careful about it in some ways and not careful enough in others, but we go with, the trust relationship we have with our clients. We try to be as clear in disclosing where our licensing is and where our expertise is and ends, and where they should get other advice. So what happens at closing? Let's go back to this. At closing, when the seller's agent hasn't received funds, let's say your purchase was waiting on the sale of your home, and your home proceeds haven't come through from those buyers, and so you can't actually get into the home that you're actually planning to buy from the proceeds of your sale because you actually haven't had the money to pay those folks yet.
I've had that happen.
Yeah.
So it was a buyer from Ontario, and it turns out this was a bit complicated because it was the agent's listing, and then the sellers from that were buying my listing.
Like a trade.
No, and then those sellers were leaving.
Yeah.
And so there were three transactions happening: a buy, a sell, and a buy.
Right.
And on the buy side, my buyer, who worked in the banking industry, her people back east forgot to do the financing before they left. This is the one I was talking about earlier in the day.
Okay.
And, they ended up, it turns out that the shortfall was $11,000 on a $550,000 home. So this is a number of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And the selling agent, the listing agent on the first property, actually phoned the lawyer, and he goes, I'll put the money, like I'll guarantee or something, like, which we're not allowed to do. But he was so pissed off. He phoned the lawyer and he's like, I can't believe you're not allowing this to go through. And it was a Friday, mistake number 2.
Right. Yes. Don't have a closing on a Friday if you can help it.
Yeah. And because it was a daisy chain, so we had 3. So we got irrevocable instructions to complete upon receipt, and everything flowed with the irrevocable instructions.
That came from the lawyers. And that's great, because a lot of lawyers are often uber protective and say, no, we're not going to allow this. This has to happen this way. We've got to protect my clients. So somebody was able to be a little bit more farsighted and see this through. That's great news. Well,
it was the same lawyer in the first and the third transaction.
Right. Oh, so they could see how it was going to flow. Yeah. So that's helpful. That's unique. That's very unique.
Yeah.
I've heard of, people showing up and the money hasn't transferred yet. It's expected. Maybe it's going to be, oh, there was a mess up at the bank, and so on and so forth. So it's coming, but it'll be here tomorrow, first thing tomorrow. So, but the moving truck is sitting there in the driveway. And so what do you do? And so sometimes you can negotiate, well, can we get into the garage? Can we throw everything in the garage for now, at least? What can we do? Because this is the thing with real estate is there's always a problem that's going to come up, and there's always a solution to that problem. And a lot of those problems we try to anticipate, but we can't anticipate everything. So what can we do to make these things work? And, you and I, Jane, we would work together on that. Some agents might be more like, no, this is the way it is. But we want to try to work and find solutions. And whatever it is, let's get that solution that works for the best people in the most broad way possible. Anyway,
Yeah.
for most people, not the best people.
Well, I think it's funny when I work with clients and they start analyzing the business.
Yeah.
And they say, I didn't realize, first of all, how much you do.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how much you do I find it's a counseling job myself.
Yeah.
Career. And you have experience in that. And I have experience in that through teaching.
Yeah.
And it's really setting out expectations and trying to be as detailed as possible, dotting your I's or crossing your I's and dotting your T's.
Thank you.
And I think also just if you prepare people through, like every time we get to a crux where we have to make a decision, here's decision A, consequence, here's decision B, consequence, and then they make the choice, then people, it's intrinsic, it's not extrinsic.
Well, and they're involved, if they're invested in the outcome and they're involved in the decision making, which everybody of course needs and wants. I mean, it depends on your client. Some people are like, look, I'm hiring you, you take care of everything and I don't want to make any decisions. And then there are other people who need to be involved in every bit of the transaction, every bit of the decision making process. And those are the people it's really helpful to have, like you have and like I have, checklists and information that we send out in advance. Here's some of the things to watch for. Here's what could happen. Managing expectations, because if we manage their expectations and they can see what potentially could be coming up and how it can be actually dealt with, it gives them both comfort, and also it's not a surprise when these things that to others might be a surprise happen. So if we can help sort of foreshadow these things, say like, these are the things that can happen. They usually don't. If they do, here's how we'll deal with them. Great.
The other thing I find though is that, so I had somebody yesterday say they didn't want to buy a house because there's oil heating. And I said, well, one of the most important and expensive parts of oil heating is the ductwork. And there are grants available to bring in gas if there's gas on the street. So if I'm finding sometimes my buyers make decisions. So now as a realtor, I'm saying, what is it that made you make that decision? Why did that outcome come out from?
And I hear that one a lot. And it's usually from people from back east, because I don't usually hear it from someone from Victoria or even Vancouver who says, I don't want oil heat. So asking, what is it about the oil heat? Oh, well, isn't it, really expensive? Or I just think it's really dirty or something like that. And, well, there's all that ductwork already there. And yes, you could convert to electric. You could convert to gas if it's available. You can put in a heat pump, and then the oil is just a backup system, and it's super efficient. You have all that ductwork. It's actually an asset.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. But just even like somebody else, I find they're making assumptions. So really you have to kind of dig into what is the assumption that they have so that you then help them work through that decision.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to buy a home with single pane windows, or I don't want to buy a home with X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. Yeah. And then you need to dig in and get that. And that's so much a part of our job is that, well, counseling, communication, but just asking questions, right? Why? What's important to you about that? And how are we going to, well, it's a great question. What is it about that that's important to you? Why is this? Why is a dangerous question? But what is what is a more powerful one? What
Yeah.
is it? What is it you'd like to see?
How did you come to that decision? That's what
Mhm.
I say.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, what do you want to talk about next week?
Well, we could talk about working with people from out of town, like, because that is something like, yeah, there's a bit of a difference in oil tanks. I don't want a place with an oil tank. I don't want a place, um, and I didn't know about this big tax. What's this property transfer tax? And nobody told me about this.
The other thing, that's a really great topic, I think, actually. I
Oh,
think,
great.
anyway, I could get on it right now. But okay, so let's talk about next week. We're going to focus on moving in from out of town. What do you need to think about? How is construction different in BC than elsewhere? What are things you need to worry about? Water is a big one, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, our whole leaky condo thing is kind of an unknown to folks from back east.
I'm
And
sure the world heard about it now. Also, understanding that the construction of leaky condos was also the same construction in housing.
yes.
People don't realize that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll be here next Monday. We're going to be talking about buying from out of town, things you need to think about, realtors you need to work with, and why you need to work with them. Right?
Sure. Let's add that in. Okay, guys. Thanks everyone for watching and enjoyed this one. And it's always fun, Jane. Thanks so much.
Okay. See you in a bit. We're going to be back with our introduction. So give us lots of high fives in a couple of minutes. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.